Honestly, just my friends. My friends growing up were like, "Oh, you should play football. You should." They're constantly nagging me, like, you should play football throughout middle school, and they're like, So I eventually just tried out, and I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with it. Well, I shouldn't say right away I fell in love with it. I still remember a conversation with that brother I was just talking to you about after my first week of practice. He gave me a phone call, and I gave him a phone call. I was like, "This is the worst sport of all time." Since we first started talking, I kind of have like gone through my athletic career and started thinking about different impactful moments. And I would say probably my freshman to sophomore year is when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to play at the next level. And it goes to one of the most challenging points in my career is, for a bit, I lost the love of the game. You go from high school where you're playing constantly. I mean, I don't think I ever left the field in high school. Who his favorite line was, "Be a process guy." And if he listens to this, he'll probably laugh and remember exactly when he said it. He's probably still saying it. But he was like, "Be a process guy." And I asked him, I was like, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "The process is 99% of everything we do." Ryan, one of the things that made me really look forward to this conversation, and after I started listening to your podcast after you reached out, is people finally talking about how hard that transition is. From a mental standpoint, let alone the change physically and socially, like mentally, it was a really tough transition, and having people be open about that experience is really great. So I would say
and thanks for tuning in today. This week's episode is brought to you in conjunction with Upskilled and their mini MBA. If you want to get the skills and knowledge to help move you forward without all of the big expense, then this mini MBA with Upskilled is the right way to go. Follow the link in the show notes and you can get $500 off. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks. Pleasure being here.
That is awesome. I know we haven't spoken for, it'll be a couple of months, and you were saying now you are well and truly into a wonderful holiday season in the US, which is great.
Yeah, we had the first snowfall here in the Northeast United States. So it's there was a layer of snow on the ground. It's since melted to my happiness, but getting into the holiday season.
Well, for me in England growing up, that was snow. That was pretty much that was the best the snow got. It got as it came down, you rushed outside and enjoyed it because certainly by the next day it would have been gone. So I'm guessing for you it's going to stick around a lot longer.
Oh yeah, we tend to get a few feet over the course of the winter time. So it gets a little cold and gray, but we get used to it.
Yeah. Now look, by the time this airs, you should be heading into spring, and it should be nice and lovely. So whilst we go through the conversation, feel the joys of spring and the enjoyment and excitement that brings, rather than the cold.
Hey, gotta enjoy every day. So I enjoy the gray moments too.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. We're having a mad heat wave down here in Australia at the moment, which is lovely. So, 30, 40 degrees, which is a bit crazy. But if you buy the water, you can survive that, right?
Yeah. Nothing like a nice ocean can't fix.
That's right. That's it. And look, today, really looking forward to hearing your perspective in, it's all about athlete career transition. That's what we're talking about here at Second Wind. And so I'm grateful that you're open to share your story, ups and downs on where you are today and the perspective that brings to you.
Yeah, honestly, it's I've had a really great experience in the States and playing collegiate American football. It's definitely been a journey for sure. The constant ups and downs, and I think we all go through them just through sport. But for the most part, it's been a lot of positive, a lot of life lessons, and I'm happy to share that story.
Yeah, great. Well, let's dive in. I suppose you're talking about the ups and downs and on the journey. Can you, paint a picture as to where you are now? What is it you're doing now? What's your role like?
Yeah, so definitely different than being out on the gridiron. I work in human resources I'm not a huge fan of calling it human resources. I think it's a little outdated, but I work on the people side of the house. People strategy or people operations. But currently, I'm a senior people partner at a company in Boston. We're a cybersecurity company focused on intelligence. So we help provide intelligence to, actually across the world, but a lot of governments as well as private companies. And I've worked in a few industries, but honestly, the people side, you can go just about anywhere and have success. And what I really care about is helping bring the business strategy to life through our people. And that's where I've found my passion post athletic career, supporting mostly the go to market side. So, like sales engineering, customer success, which is actually pretty interesting because a lot of those people and dynamic and personalities actually has a lot of sport ties. A lot of them are
Mm.
goal driven and goal oriented. So, I'm still working with a similar group of people. It's just a little bit different environment.
Yes, yeah, I bet. But now you mentioned people partner
Yeah,
as a, with HR, human resources being a bit outdated. So,
yeah,
what does a people partner do?
yeah. It's a great question. I think for me, what a people partner does is, I gave that one liner of helping bring the business strategy to life through our people, but what it really comes down to is driving accountability. And what I mean by that is, you have managers, directors, vice presidents, the C-suite, who's constantly driving accountability for their team. But who's driving accountability for those managers and those leaders? And that's where I actually feel like my role goes into effect is I work with the managers and above, talking about what's going on in their worlds and making sure that they're providing coaching and support that we're saying is needed in order to be successful as an organization. We trust that we're bringing the right people to the conversations and into the organization, but are we developing them? It's kind of like, a soccer team, football team, any kind of sports team. You get someone who's earlier in their career, you want to build them up because they have potential. I like to make sure that we are putting them in the best position to be successful. And that's my role on the people partner side.
I like that. I think it's well put, and I like the connection that you're finding there with sports, certainly team sports, in keeping them accountable, making sure that that development as athletes, we move through
Hmm.
the different ranks. I guess you're seeing your role as making sure that happens in a corporate perspective as well.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I really like that. For me, everything always comes back down to football. Doesn't matter what the
Yeah.
situation is. We've covered it in sport. We can get there
There's always at least one example.
yeah, absolutely. And you opened up. You were talking a bit about you moving through gridiron through
Yeah.
American football. Um, so, I mean, I'm been a Brit, been in Australia. We certainly see American football gridiron
Yeah.
taking off. Was that something you grew up with a passion for?
It's interesting. So it wasn't the first sport I played. I actually didn't play American football until, was it year six, year seven? The first sport that I played was actually basketball, but I was always around sports. So I'm one of five boys. I'm the youngest of the five, and my middle brother actually was, the star captain of the high school football team. He's what like the Hollywood movies are kind of made about. So he was always kind of someone that I looked up to growing up. Um, he played a very different position than I did. He played running back. I played defensive line. So I was the one trying to get after him, and he was the one trying to run away from me. But so I've always been around the sport, but basketball was my first true love. It's something I played. I learned very quickly that a 6'2" athletic big man wasn't what they were looking for at the next level. But it was what they were looking for in other types of sports arenas.
Yes, yeah. And so was it then a natural? Well, how did you get into then football? How did it come about?
Yeah, it's honestly just my friends. My friends growing up were like, "Oh, you should play football. You should." They're constantly nagging me, like, you should play football throughout middle school, and they're like, So I eventually just tried out, and I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with it. Well, I shouldn't say right away I fell in love with it. I still remember a conversation with that brother I was just talking to you about. after my first week of practice,
Mm.
he gave me a phone call, and I gave him a phone call. I was like, "This is the worst sport of all time." I said, because I was used to playing basketball. Basketball practice can be fun. Football practice is very different. It's a much more physical sport. You're hitting constantly. You're not going there shooting hoops and having a good time. You're learning the basics, the fundamentals, and those basics and fundamentals are hard.
Yeah.
So he actually told me, he said, "Hey, stick with it, play your first game, and call me after the first game." And I remember we had our first scrimmage, and I called him up. I said, "This is the greatest game of all time. I love it." It was a matter of like a week or two difference, and so that was probably how I really fell in love with the game, was that experience, and really pushing. Being out on the field on a game was really what changed it for me.
Right. Just touching on that point, you were ready to, well, you were ready to give up very early on, right? Hating the game.
Yeah.
What, as you look back, what was it your brother said? Was there anything he said as to why you should stick it out? Just that extra week?
It's so interesting. I think that was probably one of, at least from a physical standpoint, one of the biggest challenges I've had in my life at that point. And I don't know how old you are, 10, 11 years old. And, you don't really push yourself to the limit. In football, you're always pushing yourself to the limit. So I think it was just uncomfortable. And I don't remember the conversation fully, but I remember him saying, "Stick it out. Trust me, it's worth it." and and that actually kind of gets to something I want to talk about later, about just enjoying the process, and understanding that some of the pain, and some of the hard times is worth it at the end of the day, when you get that reward, or even when you look back at it and just how proud you can be of yourself after accomplishing those challenges.
Hi, I want to take this moment to thank Upskilled and their mini MBA for sponsoring this week's session. One of the great things about their mini MBA is it allows you to gain the skills and knowledge to help propel you that little bit further forward. It gets you understanding the vocabulary in the room, and also gives you some of those skills to navigate the corporate career, the government career, or indeed stepping into not for profit. So, big thanks for Upskilled and the mini MBA for sponsoring this week. And hey, check it out. Link in the show notes. You can get $500 off.
Yeah, you're quite right, and it is a point, and I'm sure we will touch on that a bit later in the conversation as well. I mean, I'm curious then for you, as you started progressing. Clearly, you were, it turned out that you were good. Can you remember a moment or season? Was there something that happened where it was, oh, I'm good at this. I'm going
Yeah,
to get to. I can go to college. I can keep playing this game.
yeah. It's interesting. When I first realized that I could go play football at the next level, at the collegiate level, um, I actually didn't think I could until after my junior season. So that's year 11 here in the United States, and um, after my junior football season, I actually had coaches coming to visit me at my high school, and that was the biggest change. Kind of, you're a high school kid, your ego gets boosted a bit. You have coaches come. I mean, it was I had coaches coming to talk to me pretty regularly, and you're leaving class to go talk to these and have conversations about joining their programs. And that was, in my opinion, the first moment where I was like, wow, I never really thought of myself in that way. I knew I was a good athlete for my town, but I didn't think of myself, kind of branching outside of that and playing football at the next level. And it definitely, that was probably the moment I was like, wow, I think I could actually push. And when you have those conversations, it actually pushes you to go even harder. You're like, well, now I have any kind of interest. Now I want to work harder than I was before to really get there, and not let myself down, but also continue to thrive, and be good at that next level.
Yeah, right. And so you did. And how did you make your choice about which school you were going to join?
Yeah, it's I think this is part of the piece that doesn't really get talked about a ton, is the recruiting process in general. The recruiting process is really hard, and I'm actually a coach now. So I work in the human resources people space, but I'm a part-time coach at the high school of the town that I live in now. It's a different town than I grew up in, but so I see actually kids going through the recruiting process. When I share with them now, because I didn't know this going through it, is a lot of these colleges cast a really wide net, and everyone is the greatest player that they've seen, and they're talking about the opportunity. So I didn't have anyone in my life that had gone through this at that point. So I was just like, wow, I'm the best player there is, and I got all these schools talking to me. But you know, once they started getting the real kid who was the number one on their list, the phone call started to go away, the conversation started to go down, and there was really only a few schools by the end of it, at least at the level that I wanted to play at, um, that I had an opportunity to play football with. Bryant University was the school that offered me, and throughout the process, I built a good relationship with the head coach and my recruiting coordinator. And honestly, I just had a level of trust with them. So when I got that offer, I accepted it pretty quickly. There's a lot of people who get the offer and then they put it all over social media. That wasn't who I was. Some of them are trying to get more offers. Some of them are just want to show off how proud they are of getting that. For me, I felt like I found a place pretty early on, and it kind of narrowed itself down on its own for me. But for me, there was two things that were important to me. I wanted a good education, and I wanted to play football at a high level, and Bryant provided that great opportunity for me.
Great. And, coming through that then, that education, how clear were you at that time that you might need the education to fall back on?
Oh, I was not clear at all. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do post university. I had my dream set on making it to the NFL. I think every kid does. As soon as you say that you can play at the collegiate level, I'm sure every kid has some sense of like, oh, I'm playing professional. I'm going to support my family. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And I think we'd all be lying to you if we said, oh no, I never had that feeling. I'm in it just for the education. So people got to dream a little bit.
Sure.
Um, so I definitely had that going into Bryant. Um, you learn pretty quickly that you were a big fish in a small pond. I mean, you're in,
How do you learn that quickly? What is
yeah,
it about the environment that puts you in your place?
yeah. It's so football especially, you get there before anyone else is on campus. So if school starts in September, you know, my first year at Bryant, we were there August 6th. So we were there a month before any other student was there. And there are some other athletes, but you're not really interacting with them. You're at practice, and your schedule during preseason is every single day. It's 6 a.m. wake up, and you're not back in the dorm to fall back asleep until 10:30 at night. And that's just the expectation. So you wake up and it's very regimented. It's you got breakfast, and then you have weights, then you have meetings. I mean, I actually still have it like ingrained into my head what that schedule looks like. And my freshman year, we actually still had two-a-days. So we still, I think we had, I forget the actual number, but we had two-a-days where we had two practices in a day, every other day for about a week or two straight.
Yeah.
And so you get about, I don't even know how many hours of football right away. And you're an
Yeah.
18-year-old kid going up against 22-year-olds, 21-year-olds who have been in a college strength and conditioning program for 3-4 years. Some of them are fifth year seniors. They're 23 years old who've been in that program for a long time. You realize, and it's also, it's iron sharpens iron, because you're no longer friends with the person across. When I say friends, you become friends with them, but you're not childhood friends. You're not growing up with them down the street, playing street hockey in the street when the cars come by. It's a different type of friendship, and you're always trying to earn that position. So when you go out there on that practice field, you're going like all out every single rep, no matter what. And you learn pretty quickly that I remember one moment in particular. I took a double team. Like I said, I played defensive line, and I had our starting offensive tackle, our starting tight end, and I stood up. Like I wasn't low. I wasn't following the technique that I was taught by the coach, and they took advantage. And like I literally, I was a bigger guy. I was in the air, like full
Mm.
blown feet horizontal, and you come down hard, and that was kind of the moment. I'm just kind of laying there, like I think I learned that, but I also think that's probably what pushed me to be better. Was feeling
Yeah.
that I was like, well, that's never going to happen again.
Yeah. What's wonderful about that story is I think the beauty we have as athletes is that a lot of the things we learn are very physical and very
Yeah,
ingrained in our mind. So you getting horizontal whilst you're thinking, "Well, I thought I was the big guy here, falling back." You
yep,
very quickly say, "Okay, next play in like 30 seconds, I'm not doing that again. I'm
yeah,
changing right now."
yeah. And you have to, you have. I mean, there's definitely a pride thing because there's that embarrassing moment of like, oh wow, like because we want everything in college, at least for football, everything's filmed. So
Yes.
every single detail is filmed, whether it's the skill work with your position coach or the team drills or whatever it is, everything is filmed. So that, I remember in the meeting room after practice, we played that on replay. So like, we're watching me go horizontal like 5 times in a row.
Well, that's a wonderful example of feedback, a wonderful example
Yeah,
of
exactly, exactly.
constructively playing it back so you could see where it is that you could improve. Doing it in a sporting football context of, look at this guy. That would be a meme nowadays. That's
Yeah.
it.
Oh, it definitely would be. Definitely would be.
Yeah. So for you, I mean, like you say, you went to Bryant, you went to a good school, you
Hmm.
got to Div 1. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable. Like, especially looking back on it, I knew it was a great experience then. Looking back on it now, I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to have been able to experience that. And I think about the education and the professors that I have and had built relationships with while I was there. The academic side, I truly believe is bar none. It really just challenged you with real world scenarios. A lot of the professors there were former corporate. They're either consultants for the business world or have worked on the business side. They weren't just solely professors just teaching you. They actually experienced it, and they brought that experience back to the classroom and used that. And they were actually, a lot of them were still consultants, so they were still going through new things on a regular basis, and they were bringing that to the classroom. So, the academic side of Bryant was sensational, and I actually think that's helped progress me quicker in my career. The football side, I mean, it's amazing. Like I know I light up and I get a big smile, but the friendships that I've built from it alone. I mean, there are people that I talk to every single day, every day, who I played football with in college. My roommates, I'm still very close to. I interact with them. I have them over at my house. I'm going to get dinner with them this week. That's just that's part of my life. They were in my wedding. That's my family. Um, and then I also look at just where I got to go. Like we traveled, we flew to multiple stadiums across the country. We played out in Montana where the plane like dropped between mountains to land in the airport. I played down at a school with a teal turf. Like it was, the turf itself was teal. Like one of the
Yeah.
schools we played had fireworks going off, and in the stadium, like it's just an amazing experience. Looking back on it now, and you just kind of shake your head, like, was that real life? Like I got to actually live that. Um, but it really is the relationships. Our coaches always used to say it when we were there. When you look back at this, what you're going to remember the most is the relationships, and it's so true. Like those are the people that are going to be with me for the rest of my life, no matter whether they're close or far away. It was amazing. And then the social side's fun. That's the college scene in America is definitely exciting. It's a good time.
Yeah.
You're a bunch of 18 to 23-year-olds who have just gone away from your parents sometimes for the first time, and you have to go to class. You gotta go to football, but at the end of the day, you control the rest of it. So, it was definitely a very enjoyable experience, and yeah, I don't regret it at all. So it was a blast.
Yeah, I mean, that's wonderful, and you talk there about the experiences that we have, and it's great that you had coaches who had an ability to emphasize the importance of enjoying this moment, enjoying the relationships that you're creating, and it sounds like through playing football, you got to see some wonderful parts of the US, and you got to
Yeah,
see them in a very different way. The fireworks, being there with the crowd, the lights, and those types
yeah.
of things. Yeah. Um, so, but when you think then your dream at that point was to make it through to the NFL, to get on the draft, to move
hmm
forward and move in that way. When did it occur to you that might not happen?
Yeah. Since we first started talking, I kind of I've like gone through my athletic career and started thinking about different impactful moments, and you know, I would say probably my freshman to sophomore year is when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to play at the next level, and it goes to one of the most challenging points in my career is for a bit I lost the love of the game. You go from high school where you're playing constantly. I mean, I don't think I ever left the field in high school. If an American football game is 120 plays at the high school level, I was quite literally on the field for 115 of them. And then you go to college, it's just a very different experience. And to go from playing 95% of the game to not even touching the field my freshman and sophomore year, it's really hard to go through practice every single day, to get beat up physically and mentally, um, and to not feel like you had that chance to go out and show it. It was really difficult. And losing that love of the game is probably actually when I realized that I wasn't going to make it to that next level, because I knew people in my grade, and some of the freshmen that were coming in behind me were already playing. We're playing at that, we're playing on the field, and I was trying to fight for my spot to get on the field. Um, but I would actually also say that's the moment when I started improving, which is a really weird situation, because I kind of knew, like, all right, well, you're not going to play at the NFL, but you might as well do the best you can, and just, there was no more pressure. I guess that's what it is. That's what it, putting a word to it, there was no more pressure. There was no more, you need to do this to be successful. It was, how about you just play the game that you love and enjoy every second of it? And started focusing, even more on the fundamentals, and doing after practice work, and which I was doing already, but just even more of it. That was probably when it progressed even further, and without the pressure, things started to improve.
Wow. I mean, that's really interesting to hear you put it in that way. You're talking about wanting to get on the field, wanting to be in that first team, that starting team to make those plays, 200
hmm
odd plays in that game. But by not playing, essentially by not achieving what you want to achieve, that helped you change your perspective, so that suddenly you were saying, okay, I'm going to enjoy practice, I'm going to enjoy the training. It sounds to me like you started to enjoy the process much more.
it definitely is. And I had a coach in high school who, his favorite line was, "Be a process guy." And if he listens to this, he'll probably laugh and remember exactly when he said it. And he's probably still saying it. But he was like, "Be a process guy." And I asked him, I was like, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "The process is 99% of everything we do." He said, "If you don't love the process, why the heck are you doing it?" And it never really clicked for me until, I think, actually, that part of my life, and in college, when I went through that struggling point and just reminded myself to love the process. It's something I continue to pass on now, because he's so right. How many, I'm sure you experienced it in your own athletic career. How many times were you just out back by yourself, or, working on your technique, and that's all the process, and the glory, and what everyone thinks is the best part is really 1% of what we do. And he hit the nail on the head, and it's something that just clicked.
So what changed? So at that moment on the field and the practice and everything that came around it, you changed, you enjoyed
Yeah.
it, you went into the process. Where did your mind go then in terms of, well, what will happen after college?
Yeah, it's I definitely made a switch. I started focusing on like the academic side. I had some goals that I set for myself academically. My first semester at Bryant wasn't the best, I'll say. And I started setting goals. Like, it put me behind a little bit, and I set goals that I was going to graduate with honors. And I knew I had a ways to work out of that. So I started setting those goals, and I did end up achieving that. I can proudly say I did end up graduating with honors, dug myself out of that hole. Um, but I also started focusing on, and honestly, I give a lot of credit to my now wife. We actually met in college, and we were um, dating at the time. And she pushed me to get internships and work experience over the summers and during winter break or winter session. Like, so I was constantly getting work experience before I was even in the workforce. Um, Now, playing a sport and getting internships definitely created some interesting schedules. During the summertime, I was waking up at 4 a.m., getting a workout in, coming home, showering, and then driving to work for a 9 to 5, and then going back and doing a field workout. So like, it definitely creates some long days. But I would say the switch definitely pivoted towards focusing on my life and how can I prepare myself for what's next, while not sacrificing the football side.
I mean, that's a challenge, right? You know, I come across it a lot with individuals. I'm focusing
Hmm.
on the football, or focusing on that sport, working really hard. This is what I'm about. Then the realization kicks in is, well, actually, to make this work longer term, I need a job. I need that, be it a
Hmm.
9 to 5, but it's a more traditional workforce
Yeah.
role. How did you mentally switch between training? I'm doing this because, certainly as you developed in the college career, you were playing more. How do you
Hmm.
switch between the two?
I don't know if there is a switch, and what I mean by that is, there's definitely a different type of person that you are on a sports field. Like, I think there's a different level of aggression and grit that's needed. But I think those characteristics, like the grittiness and resilience, um, the drive that you need to be successful on the field, were things that actually led to me, because I was curious. Like, if I look at the practice field in football, the person that I was playing behind, so like my freshman and sophomore year when I was not getting playing time, the person in front of me was probably the best football player I've ever been on a field with, ever. Um, just he ended up going to an NFL mini camp. He was the sack leader. He's just an unbelievable person and someone I looked up to at school, but also someone that I've stayed in touch with now. Um, and I was just curious to learn from him, and I would ask him questions. I would work out with him. I would say, okay, like, how do you put your right foot here? Like, how do you place your hands, or how you react? Like, just talking through it with him to understand and learn. And I think that curiosity pays off dividends in the workforce too. So I try to take the curiosity of just the wanting to learn, the want to do better, and transitioning that to the corporate world, but also the grittiness, like being able to take feedback and saying like, hey, you did this presentation really poorly. This is what I would expect differently. It's like, from the football experience, you're just constantly getting yelled at. So someone's politely telling me, hey, you did this poorly. I was like, okay, thanks. and you
Yeah,
move on. And, some people can harp on that, but it was actually a nice change of pace
yeah.
for me.
Well, do you it's funny you talk about the feedback. Again, it's a recurring theme in some respects, and you talk about it a lot. I think it's. Do you notice it? I mean, you even said there, on the football field, someone's yelling at you. So it's like, okay, I know they're talking to me and I know they're telling me this is exactly it. Then you
Yeah.
move into that corporate world and someone is politely saying, hey, you got time for a little chat? I was thinking, how did you find that when, do you pick it up the same way? Because I'm like, listen, is there a problem? Tell me what's going on. How do you find it?
I've said that to people. I've said, like, I was like, listen, I said, I don't take things personally. Like, it's just how I was raised through my family and sport. Like, if I did something wrong, just tell me, and I'll just take it as it is, and I will do better. But I've had that experience directly where someone has asked me, like, hey, do you mind if I provide you feedback right now? And I was just taken aback that I appreciated that they asked me, but I was just taken aback, like, I didn't know you had to ask someone for
Yes.
feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wonderful, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah,
wow. Sure. Yeah, please do. And then they'll be all
definitely.
beating around the bush and say, well, this is the nice thing. This is bad. This is not. No, just tell me what it is you want to say.
Yeah.
We can get this to 30 seconds. That's fine. Um, so when you said, well, I suppose, you're talking there about recognizing you're perhaps not going to make that dream, and you started that focus, and you talk about that balance and the struggle. It's interesting you say there's not really a switch. It's sort of a continuation or a bit of a blurring that happens. What was it like for you entering then? In fact, let me ask it a different way first. What did it feel like taking the pads off for the last time at college, thinking, I'm not going to the NFL, I'm not in the draft, I'm not doing the mini camps?
Hmm.
Did you know when you were going to play again next? I mean, how does it work?
Um, I think American football is really hard because there is, for the most part, there is, but it's few and far between. There is no opportunity to put the pads back on. And I didn't realize how much football made an impact in my life until I started coaching after, and multiple years after that. But and I'll get to that. I think I was actually having a conversation with one of my teammates about a month ago. It was actually recently after we had our first conversation, and it was top of mind for me. And we looked at each other, and he said to me, and I was thinking it, and he just said it. He said, to be honest, he said the post football blues were very real. And I was like, he just put it in a very simple way of saying, like, when you remove such a big part of your life, something that's provided structure, it's provided life lessons, it's provided mentors, father figures at an early age in life, and it just gets ripped from you without any way to access it again. And it just ends. Like, I don't, there aren't, like, I know there are, in the town that I live, there are Sunday soccer or football leagues every Sunday, and they're always playing on the field. But and there's pickup basketball that you can play at almost any court in the town that I live in. Tennis, if you go to a tennis court, you can play. Golf, you can always find a place to play. Football, there's no one with pads on at the field on a random Sunday. Like, hey, you want to play some football? Like, it just doesn't happen. So I got back into it, and I didn't realize how much I missed it until I got back coaching. And
Mm-hmm.
this is my third year coaching now, and it's a different feeling, but honestly, it's one of my proudest achievements within the sport is being able to coach kids through their high school experience, and some of them are playing at the college level now, which is just amazing to watch. There's a good chunk of kids I've coached who I can proudly say play defensive line in college, and we still talk and coach and go through drills. They'll send me videos still. It's really exciting to be a part of, but that transition was hard. It was a really difficult feeling. Um, yeah, I don't know how else to put it, but it was very sad to lose such a big part of my life.
And how did that look for you? How did that sadness? It was difficult. It's challenging to put into words. So what did it mean?
Yeah, I think well, I know, like, I kind of revolted a little bit away from what football was. So football is very regimented. You have a schedule, like I said, 5:30 in season. My senior year, we were waking up at 5 o'clock. We had practice at 5:30. and then we had weights, and then we had film, and then you had class, and then you kind of do it all, and then you had film again. So you're just like constantly going, and then you have schoolwork, and maybe you fit in a meal or two throughout the way. Like you just every single hour is soaked up. Once football ended, I basically just I was like, well, I'm definitely not waking up at 5:30 ever again. So I was waking up, I jokingly say, I was like, now I wake up at 7. And my wife thinks I'm crazy, but I stayed away from the weights for a little bit. I got away from some of the things that were part of my daily routine, and I've since gotten back into them, but there was a good chunk of time where I just was doing everything that I wasn't doing before. And once I realized that I needed that structure, I got back into it, but it took a while to find it again.
And so when you stepped away, finishing college, you then going into work, how did you, well, actually, what did you major in? What was your degree? And what was your first job then outside of that collegiate structure?
Yeah. So I was fortunate. So I had it was business administration, but I had a concentration in human resources, actually. So a lot of my classes were focused on the human resources practice. So I took classes on employment relations, on human resources management, compensation, international human resources, like some of the global aspects and interacting with different cultures. And then I had a minor in psychology. And I actually believe that fit really nicely with understanding how humans interact with each other from a science standpoint, and also tying in the business practices. That was my degree. My first job out of college, I went to a company called Liberty Mutual Insurance, which is a massive organization. It's around 78,000 people worldwide when I joined. And I was part of what they called the HR development program. It was a rotational program. So we spent 8 months in 3 different jobs. So my first job was it was called Talent Management Practices, was the team name. That was focused on industrial organizational psychology, which is like the science side behind human resources, and why we do surveys, why we ask behavioral interview questions, like the actual data behind why we do certain things. My second role was employment relations, where I was actually working. That's an interesting job, and I will say, there's a lot of performance management. So when people are struggling, but then there's also, the reality is, like, if there's discrimination or alleged discrimination or harassment, people aren't getting along. Like, just human interactions in the workforce are very interesting, and I'll leave it at that. And then the last rotation I had there was in a compensation team, which is why we make pay decisions and how we get the data behind it. Now, I thought originally it was just kind of like, okay, you just pay people X amount of money and hope for the best. But there's a lot of data and information that goes into those decisions and how they get paid.
Yeah, very true. It's great that you had an opportunity to enter a large organization that was able to move you around. So you were able to experiment and explore different aspects of that human resources world.
It was amazing. It was too big for me, and I definitely mean it. It was never going to, like, once I was there, it was never going to be a long-term fit. It was just way too big of an organization for me. But the people that I learned from, the people that I met there, are some of the smartest people you'll meet in the space. Like, absolutely incredible people to learn from. Some of them I actually saw one. She lives a few towns over from me. I saw her not too long ago, and just like people who have made an impact in my life. But I like taking all those skills that I learned, and that's how I got into the business partner side, the people partner side, and that's how I went down to the tech companies. I took what I learned and brought it to a smaller organization.
see, that's interesting, right? I mean, I'm hearing three things already, and I feel like there's going to be another one coming up, whereby starting playing football, sticking it out beyond
Yeah.
that first thoughts, then going to college, struggling between the freshman sophomore years, thinking, hold on, this is not for me, and then ending with these wonderful, absolutely awesome experiences that kick in.
Yeah.
And here again we go, great opportunity, wonderful organization, getting to move around and do these different things, but recognizing, hey, this isn't going to be for me, but at least going through it and saying, right, I'm going to go and learning, getting the learnings, the lessons from it in order for you to move forward or pass forward. Do you recognize that in yourself?
Now that you say it, it's very clear. I don't think I've ever put it that way. Yeah, it's such a good point. I've been very fortunate in my life where I've ended up in situations um, that I look back at some things and how I ended up where I was, or being in certain places at certain times, and getting certain mentors or connecting with certain people in my life who became mentors. Um, yeah, there's definitely a theme, and maybe there's another one coming up of a big challenge, and then into another springboard. That would be great.
Yeah.
But um, yeah, there's definitely a trend. I never put it together. I appreciate now that you have. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I just think it's interesting because it's an ability to stick through, but also to learn at the same time.
Yeah.
And to take that and then apply it onto that next thing. So it isn't a lost opportunity. You're sort of making the most of what you have, which are great opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. One of the organizations I was at, it was a e-commerce company. They were a customer data platform, and the CEO always used to say 1% done, and it was a reference to a mountain range. Essentially, it's like once you get to the peak, you're only 1% done. There's another peak for you to climb, and it's just once you hit that peak again, you're only 1% done. There's always a higher mountain. And I think that's kind of what you just talked about. There's a challenge, you overcome it, you hit the peak, and then you find that next challenge and you overcome it, and then you hit the peak, and then you go from there, and you're just continuing to find that next challenge. I think as athletes, I think we're driven towards those challenges. It's part of our DNA and what makes us tick. So I think I'll always try to take advantage of those situations.
Yeah, and so look, today I know you're in the people partner role, and that sounds like it's this fit where you're working with the sales folk, the senior leaders. What roles were you doing beforehand where it didn't gel? What's that journey been like for you?
Yeah. I've been fortunate. So since I exited, I would actually say that the roles that didn't necessarily click for me was at Liberty Mutual, was at that larger organization. Um, and it wasn't because of the company. It was the way it was structured is I was doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and I was getting the data and then providing it to the business. And in the people partner role, most of my day is meeting based. So I'm meeting directly with the leaders. I'm interacting with them. I'm talking to them. Okay, like what's your pain? Like what can we help solve? What is your team asking for? How can we build that? And there's more of a human element, a human interaction piece that I was really craving. And that was the piece that was missing for me. And again, some people love that. Some people want to be behind the scenes and building all these amazing tools. But I needed that. Hey, this is what we built. This is how it can help you. I like that handoff, and that was the piece that I was missing.
And so now, where you are, I mean, did you know this type of role existed? I mean, even through collegiate years, did you know this type of role that you're in today existed?
Yes, but not to the way I learned it. What I mean by that is I went to an organization after Liberty Mutual called Rapid7, which is a cybersecurity company. And I was very fortunate to have multiple mentors there, but two people in particular that were incredibly just amazing mentors for me. My direct boss, she was incredible. Like the way that she taught me how to operate and how to navigate tricky situations and to navigate the people strategy world, the people partner world that was focused on treating people fairly and equitably and doing what's right while also navigating just tough business challenges was incredible. So, like, my view of it in the collegiate years, I knew the role existed, um, but they really opened my eyes into the possibilities of what you can make it and the difference between just being good and what being great. And I would actually say moving the needle about what this role can be. And I learned from people that were, front runners in my eyes of what the future of the people strategy world holds.
I mean, that's fascinating. Again, interesting angle, I guess, in terms of discovering or figuring out where you are at. I suppose to flip it just a bit more, when you think then of the roles or the role you're in today, what from football have you had to leave behind in order to be successful?
Hmm. Hmm. I think emotion, and what I mean by emotion is more having control of the emotion. Is there are times where football, you're encouraged, like if you're excited, show your excitement. If you're angry, like kind of put it out onto the field and use that to your advantage. In my role, and I think this goes for a lot of corporate roles, but even non-corporate roles, I think the power of suppressing emotions. And when I say suppressing emotions, I don't think it's hiding it or not actually feeling the emotion. I think it's just being able to control how you're engaging with the world. So if you're having a conversation with someone, and there's some really hard conversations that we have to have in my profession, and if someone snaps at me in those conversations, I would say the natural football reaction is to snap back. But in
Yeah.
my role, you just have to take it and you have to remain calm. You have to remain poised and respond professionally, no matter what that person says. So I would say that's probably the biggest change between, the gridiron field and the corporate side for my world is I cannot respond emotionally. I have to respond dialed in, and I have to respond in a way that doesn't put and I focus on the relationship. I don't want to say something to someone that impacts their view of the organization, because this may be, the reality is I deal with a lot of, conversations that aren't so positive, and someone's maybe they're struggling in their role, and this is, they're fighting for their job, and yeah, I understand why they may be angry or upset. Like it's their livelihood.
Yeah.
Um, I want to make sure that they felt heard, and reacting emotionally can actually just make it an argument versus giving them the platform to voice how they're feeling. And I want to give them that space to voice how they're feeling.
How did you manage that shift?
Hmm. You know, go back to the Liberty Mutual days. The employment relations role, though that was when I met some of the great mentors to me who just navigated really tough situations, who had to ask very difficult questions in a very calm, professional way. If there were some situations that if you heard it in a comedy, a comedy club, you'd probably laugh at of like, no, that doesn't actually happen. Like this is, there's some really just crazy situations that they were constantly composed. And it was something that I learned to do. And originally where I was in my career, I was more of a note taker at that point, and I was listening to the conversation and I was learning from them. And then eventually I did take on my own calls and did it myself. But early on with them, I was really just note taking. And
Right.
I, similar to the football field, I was asking questions. How did you do this? How did you flow from this question to that one? How did you know to ask it this way? Um,
Yeah.
Asking how did you not laugh when they responded that way?
Yeah.
Navigating that and learning from them was really how I made that transition.
Yeah.
I had
I
the
mean,
benefit of
that's great.
being able to be on mute, so that was how I learned.
The benefit of being on mute. I'm gonna have to delve. I'm gonna have to think about that because it's an interesting, thought. It's the ability to actually I can just listen and you can observe, like you say, like you did in the football field, like you are doing as you continue to develop through your career. I mean, thinking about yourself to an extent still being in the transition. When you think about your experience to date,
Hmm.
what sorts of things do you now look back on and think, yeah, I would have avoided that, or that's probably didn't help me in the way that I wanted it to, versus which things would you say this is what myself or others should lean into to support the transition?
So there's a few things that are actually outside of work that I would recommend people do making that transition. Um, I would find a hobby. Um, like for me, I got back into working out. I found that routine again for me of what's important to me, and staying active was important to me. I would also say I grew up in a kitchen, like not actually cooking in a kitchen, like a professional kitchen, but in my house, we were just always sitting around the stove and having conversations. Holidays were always big for us. And I've actually found a huge love for cooking and just being creative. I'm not an artist. I'm not a writer. I definitely don't have a singing voice, but I can get creative by cooking meals and providing meals to people and loved ones in my life. So that's something that has been an absolute blast for me. And finding those hobbies it's helped make that transition easier
Hmm.
because I have that passion and I have something that I really enjoy that brings me happiness.
Yeah.
Um, and that's outside of work. I would also say um, finding ways to stay involved in the sport. I know it's not as much of a transition, but coaching has probably made me better at my job because there was something that was missing from me that is no longer missing. Like I'm feeling like I'm still a part of it. And I'm not a full time coach. I'm not there every single day, but when I am there, it recharges me in
Mm.
ways that I couldn't do before. Um, and then for work, go to the meetings that you're not invited to. And what I mean by that is, you know, even if you're just listening and, or the meeting's happening and you have an opinion, go to the meeting, sit down. This was advice that I got from one of my mentors that I was talking about earlier. And she said, they're not going to kick you out. What's the harm? Like, just go and just kind of like build the relationship, go like, and then obviously you have to do that the right way. There's, don't just
Hmm.
go sit on some random meeting, but if there's a meeting that you're working on a project, like find the right time to join a conversation or to push the
Hmm.
envelope, not to just to shove your opinion to someone, but to listen and learn, understand how those conversations happen, what they're talking about, challenge yourself to be better and to learn more.
Hmm.
It'll make the transition 100% better.
Yeah. No, I like those. If I play it back, what I hear is get a hobby that takes you outside of work. Do something that is different. Um, use sport, or because of the probably the passion or energy that you got from sport, use sport as a way to recharge. So find a way to keep the sport in your life. And the last one there is, well, I'll say be on mute. So go into a meeting, listen, learn, and those are the things that seem to be most important, at least from your experience in terms of helping with that transition.
Yeah, I think one thing. There's a great TED talk that I love. If you can't, like, learning's a really big piece in my life, and this
Mm.
TED talk said it was about communication, and it shared that a lot of people listen to respond, and we should be listening to understand. And that was like it was just a quick line that has stayed with me for years now. And I was like, wow, just changed
Yeah.
the way that I interacted with people. And it's something that, and I truly believe, and it goes towards learning, is understanding why someone is asking that question. And sometimes the words they're asking are not what they're actually asking.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I definitely believe that. Listen to understand, you learn so much more. And indeed, that's what these conversations are about, is for everyone else who's listening right now, is listening to understand your journey and where you've been, try and get a grasp of your perspective to see, can it help them understand more about themselves as well. So
Yeah.
I think it's great. I mean, what else? Is there any other advice or guidance you think from your experience you'd give to athletes to support them through that transition journey?
The transition's hard, and I don't think people talk about how hard it is enough. I think, Ryan, one of the things that made me really look forward to this conversation, and after I started listening to your podcast after you reached out, um, is people finally talking about how hard that transition is from a mental standpoint, let alone the change physically and socially. Like mentally, it was a really tough transition, and having people be open about that experience is really great. So I would say talk to other athletes, interact, be open to sharing how hard that was. And I think you'll come to realize there's a lot of people in a similar situation, and they're going through a very different but very similar feeling that you are. And I would also say just keep going, keep pushing through that first week to go full circle back to my first week of practice. Like, it will get better, and you're going to find a new passion and a new challenge that will continue to excite you. But I'd also say, like, continue to learn, be curious. And if you're curious, you'll be in a really good spot.
Andrew, I want to say thanks very much for sharing your journey, your perspective. Loved this conversation. Look, if people listening want to get in contact, get in touch with you, follow your journey, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. It's Andrew Barton. I've got the black and white photo of the one that popped up. But also feel free to follow me on Instagram. It's Synergy B, which is it's a long story. Feel free to message me and find out what that was about. But yeah, those are the two main platforms to follow me and follow my journey.
Wonderful. Andrew, thanks very much once again. And, I'm sure the listeners are going to love this one. Thank you.
Awesome, Ryan. Pleasure. Thank you so much.